My name is Mike Sturdivant, again with Pastor Properties, part of the project development team. Thanks everyone for taking the time and joining us tonight in a challenging year, challenging time. I'll do a brief introduction of the project and turn it over to Sheldon here to go through some of the finer points of the project. And then as Jennifer mentioned, we'll open it up for questions, comments. Again, Mike Sturdivant. Like a lot of you, I'm also resident of St. Louis Park. I live in the Cedar Manor neighborhood. My wife and I have lived there for about 4 years. And Pastor Properties is also a St. Louis Park based owner, manager, developer of shopping center and mixed use developments throughout the Twin Cities. The company's been around for 70 years. Everything we own is, again, mentioned in the Twin Cities here. We most recently acquired the Texa Tonka shopping center in 2019 and recently completed a large-scale redevelopment, kind of rejuvenation of that project. Our kind of goal and vision when we set out redeveloping the shopping center was really bringing in commercial tenants that we thought were going to be additive into the area. And I'm happy to announce we've signed 2 new leases with 2 new restaurants, which we're excited about. And we are getting closer on hopefully bringing in a kind of a 3 concept coffee shop, bakery, and ice cream shop. So just thought I'd make some note of that on progress in the shopping center. Sheldon, maybe we go to the next slide in the PowerPoint here.
Sure.
It's kind of project background on the development proposal we're talking about this evening. So redevelopment of kind of a decades-long vacant and underutilized essentially parking lot. And with that, there's quite a bit of environmental contamination cleanup that would be part of this redevelopment. There was a gas station located on the southernmost end of the parcel where there's currently a vacant office building. And there have been several dry cleaners operating, currently one operating in the area, and there have been several that have operated in this area over time. Project also brings some much needed affordable housing to the area. We experience this across the Twin Cities that there's a large need for affordable housing. So we're excited to bring this into the neighborhood along with some townhome style housing, which is kind of a unique product type to this area and a unique offering for residents. And then with that, we would be providing a pedestrian connection to Rainbow Park. Currently, timeline is projected construction start in 2021 with completion in 2022. Next slide, please. This kind of gets to the why of the project. We think creation of a welcoming, walkable, mixed-use environment is kind of a key to a successful neighborhood. We envision residents having walkable access to new restaurants, a cafe. We've got a regional park system and trails nearby. And we think it's important to provide housing along transit lines to encourage a reduction in vehicular traffic. One thing we also hear from our commercial tenants is their continued challenge on hiring employees. And so we, again, think providing a walkable environment here where folks can both shop and potentially work in some of these commercial nodes. Next slide, please. Some of the housing details. So as I mentioned, there is an affordable housing component to this project where we would be providing 20% of the units at affordable at 50% area median income. So to give an example of what that looks like on a rental basis, the studios and the affordable units are around $870 a month. Alcoves, 1 bedrooms, $925 a month. 2 bedrooms, $1,100 a month. And currently the area median income as determined by Met Council is around $51,700 for a family of 4. Market rate units will be available on a market rate basis in 2022. Parking, so we are providing quite a bit of parking on site. We have 73 stalls that are in an enclosed underground parking structure. And again, Sheldon will get into some of the finer points of site plan here. So again, thanks everyone. We're excited. I'll turn it over to Sheldon and you can do a deeper dive into the site plan.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Well, thank you everyone for attending tonight and taking the time out of your evenings. Thank you again to Councilperson for being here and for Jennifer for your help. Let me get right into the project. So let's see. Let me just page through a couple things. So just a sort of a orientation thing again. We're just on the east side of the Texa Tonka shopping center. And then obviously just north of some of the other restaurants like Walk in the Park and things at the corner. We are developing the whole site that's encompasses between Minnetonka Boulevard and 29th, just to the east of Texas. And then there'll be a link here in the middle to Rainbow Park as well. Just some quick aerial views of where the site is. I'll jump through some of these fairly quickly because being with the neighborhood, you understand a lot of the context. From a zoning perspective, the front half of the site was C2. Now it was recently rezoned to C1, which is a little bit lower scale commercial use. And then the back end is R3 currently, and we're rezoning the whole site together. All the units will be rental at this point, including the townhomes. And there's a total of 112 that we're looking to add. Reiterate some of those points. And once again, obviously we have some fantastic links to neighborhood amenities, to the Cedar Lake Trail, to the bus lines along Minnetonka as well. And so we're hoping that and planning for a lot of the new residents to take full advantage of those amenities. And just some views of the neighborhood. Now, like I said, I'll flip through some of these fairly quickly. And so a little closer look here. Hopefully everyone can see this okay. So there in the development, we have a multi-story building here, apartment building with parking underground, mostly underground, but it includes also some walkout units here to Texas. And then that's all. So Minnetonka is here on the right side, and then Texas here is on the bottom of the page, just reoriented to be a little easier to zoom in. And then we have townhouses along this back edge with parking behind that they pull under into the backside of their units. And then this is the pedestrian connection to Rainbow Park, which is right here. And the shopping center, just for some is right there with that access to sort of service alley in the back. And with me. And just to talk about sort of the scale and context, let me zoom in here a little bit. We are, as far as the setbacks of the buildings go, the townhomes, these set back about the same as the twin homes and other houses along this side of the street on Texas. And then we're actually set back even further than some of these single family homes that are to our east along 29th. And then along Minnetonka, we're about 30 feet or so back from the street, which allowed some landscaping, some front yards for 3 units that we have facing the street. And then we have a lobby space and some amenity areas along a little public courtyard that we have out in front. And then on the side here, we have landscaping and a little dog exercise area with some surface parking directly behind the building here, which will be bordered by a fence and some additional landscaping that's between the parking and our property line, which also borders a couple houses here as well as the park. So let me just move forward. This is a lighting plan. It just gives a sense of, some of the surface lights that'll be around the balconies, just as a matter of some information, as well as some lighting around the back. I think the balance that we're trying to strike here is where it's lit enough that it feels safe for everyone, and yet not so much lighting that it, obviously goes out into the neighborhood. So, and then I think we'll get into the, bear with me one second. One of the primary things that we look at when we're doing a new building in a neighborhood is we look at, especially when we're adding some height to it, how the shadows sort of affect the neighborhood, what all the surrounding houses and other buildings are like, and what kind of effects they may have. The city themselves has a standard to follow for that, where any new construction shouldn't shade more than 50% of a face of a neighboring building, but for more than 2 hours between the hours of 9 and 3. This gives a general sense, starting with 9 a.m. here on the left side in the spring or fall. Summer, of course, you got a lot of high sun, so not a lot of shadowing there. And then on the right side, it's sort of that afternoon between spring, summer, and winter, different timelines. And I have a little enlargement of some views of that too, that shows all the housing around here. And so I think what you can probably see is, you get some shadowing, of course, from the shopping center to that house behind, but we have a lot of benefits of both, the street bounding our site, as well as the setbacks that we have that we're really not impinging on any other, neighbors from a shadowing standpoint. And then I think I'll just run in through the plans briefly. Each of these townhomes has a walkout to the street. This just shows the building themselves, and then the parking behind in your garage. Briefly, while we're back on the site plan, I'll just make a slight change in what I'm showing here. I think it's maybe a little easier to understand some of these things if you look at the landscape plan, so you can kind of see some of those improvements as well, as rather than just a plain site. one thing I'll also point out is currently there's quite a number of curb cuts that happen on this site. There's one up here off of Minnetonka. There's one right around the corner here as you turn onto Texas, and there's another three more along the property. And if everyone can see this okay, this sort of indicates all the ones that we're taking out.
Yeah,
And then
there's 5 total today.
It's 5 total that we're taking out, and then we're consolidating them into one here about midway through on Texas Avenue. And we were very thoughtful in that we wanted to maintain, that connection and the traffic as close to Minnetonka as possible. So there's really no reason for any of the residents to go into the neighborhood unless they're on a bike and they want to get on the bike lane, and go up to Cedar Lake Trail. So
the other thing I would add to that is, I think, folks who have traveled in the area thought it was really important to remove, especially some curb cuts along Minnetonka Boulevard. So,
correct. That'll just help the flow of traffic at the intersection. And you'll notice, it may be hard to see on some of the screens, but in addition to all these heavier black outlines of all the new trees that we have, we're also saving quite a number of the good trees that are existing there on the site currently. And so that was a part of the site design, and part of our intentions going forward is to save as much of that canopy as we can. So moving on, I want to just run through the building. So elevations, these are the townhomes, and we have along the front a fair amount of brick on each of these houses, a little bit of a accent piece at the entry doors to add a little bit of the artistic flair to them. A major part of our design as we were looking at this project and past property, a large thing to do with this, we're looking at a lot of examples of mid-century modern projects as precedents for what we're doing with the building. And so this is the site that faces 29th, and then this is just the connection point in the back, and then there's also some of the link areas along here, and then this would be an elevation off the end facing back toward the neighbor. So what we have in terms of materials, and the materials are fairly consistent between the two buildings, between the townhomes and then the larger building, is a base of brick, and then with some siding that's in a couple different colors, a really dark sort of blue color, and then a little bit of a very light gray as well. And then the metal for balconies and things like that will end up being probably much closer to like a black color. This gives a sense of the parking underground because of the way the Texas Avenue drops in grade as you go north. This whole portion up here is buried, and then you start to see part of that garage, and then we have introduced 3 walkout units here that have direct access to the street to help add some vibrancy to that streetscape, as well as just giving some more opportunities for those types of units. And then the main level where you enter from Minnetonka Boulevard, there's an outdoor patio here with some empty spaces at the corner, and then some more units that can walk out to Minnetonka. And like I mentioned before, they have a pretty good setback from the street, so they're not going to feel like they're right on the road. Gives them a little privacy as well. And then there's some additional units back here toward the north. Upper level is pretty straightforward. in terms of a unit layout. I think the next two pictures will show. So in our sizing of the building, one thing that was important to us was keeping a pretty modest scale along Minnetonka, and then as we step down toward the neighborhood to the townhouses. So we have stepped the building back quite a ways along Minnetonka over here, as well as from the neighboring property. So this is only 3 stories, and then it steps up to 4 at this point. Because of the grade change at Texas, you basically, in terms of what you'd be looking at, you'd add a story to that. So this roof level is at the, if you're standing down here on Texas Avenue, this would be like the fourth floor. And I think the renderings later on will give a much better description of that. This is, the grade change in Texas Avenue. This is that west elevation. You can see all the brick that we have going on the base and the units that walk out. This, of course, being the flip side, the side facing the park, and a couple of houses behind. And once again, brick siding, some metal siding. This is a painted siding here, fiber cement. And then the garage entries on that north end of the apartment building. So I'll flip through a couple renderings, which will give maybe a little better, easier to understand feel. So this is Minnetonka and Texas. Here's that 3-story element of, brick and siding with those walkout ground floor units right back there. And another view looking then beyond to the Texa Tonka shopping center. And this is a view showing that connection and the pedestrian link to the neighborhood or to Rainbow Park with the townhouses here on the left. And then a view from pretty close to 29th, looking southeast. And then finally a view of the park, or from the park back at the apartments and the townhouses. So, and then finally, I think a little aerial view of the building and sort of on the site. And this is just a leftover. We don't have parking out in front, just back here from the existing site, but to capture the, that being said, I think I've covered the vast majority. Might give a good overview of units and things like that. As far as unit types, they are everything from studios that are probably around 450 square feet up to 2-bedroom plus dens, where you're closer to 12 or 13 or 100 plus, especially in the townhomes. Those are a little bit larger, for maybe a little more geared toward potentially small families. And then with the 112 units that we have, we're looking at 22 or 20% of those units being having an affordable component. So, Mike, anything you'd like to add?
Sheldon, if you want to flip back just briefly to the
Sure.
aerial with some of the setbacks, I just talked
Sure.
a little bit about that shot.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
So just wanted to talk about this angle for a moment. We're being very intentful here about where we're trying to concentrate most of the density, which is on the southern portion of the site, in kind of a more commercialized intersection. And then as we're stepping towards 29th, you can see we step down considerably with the townhomes as we get back into the more residential part of the neighborhood. So
correct.
Yeah, Sheldon, other than that,
both in height and in setback as well. Where the 2-story buildings for the townhouses here are, meeting or exceeding what the existing streetscape is like in that area of the neighborhood. So. Okay. I think with that, we could probably stand for some questions. If Jennifer, maybe you want to coordinate that, would that work?
Sure. And actually, Mike, or Sheldon, sorry, Mike and Sheldon,
Sure.
Sure.
you hop back to the PowerPoint and I will go
Oh.
over some of the traffic analysis that's been done.
Oh, sure.
I know that that's a concern and an interest of people, so I want to make sure that we touch on that. So in 2019, the city did a small area plan for the Texa Tonka area. As part of that plan, we did a pretty comprehensive traffic analysis to determine what the capacity of the intersections around the commercial node are. That study was completed by SEH Engineering. And we're using that partially because all of the data on that traffic was collected prior to COVID. So we wanted to make sure that the traffic analyzed were as close to typical traffic patterns and numbers and movements as usual, not during this weird time during COVID where people are working from home. So we're focusing on that traffic study rather than another one because we want to make sure it's the most accurate information. So if you go to the next slide. So traffic studies aren't something that everyone is well versed in. So I want to kind of explain how they analyze intersections. The intersections are analyzed based on average delay per vehicle per intersection, and they're ranked on a level of service or LOS between A and F, with A being the best traffic operation, meaning traffic flows freely through the intersection. There's very few delays. Where F means there's lots of congestion. It's really hard to get through the intersection, long waits at stoplights and turning movements. Typically, throughout the Twin Cities, level of service A through D is generally considered acceptable in the Twin Cities. We can go to the next slide then, Sheldon. So the traffic study for the Texa Tonka node focused primarily on the intersections that are the little blue dot next to them. We didn't focus on
Someone, sorry, Jennifer.
Yeah, someone unmuted.
Maybe, is it Lee? Unmute?
Here we go. I'm
There
just
we
gonna
go.
unmute people. Thank you. Okay, sorry. So the traffic study really focused on the commercial node and potential redevelopment of that node and how traffic operates at these major intersections. Traffic would be assumed at the intersections east of Minnetonka to operate similarly or be affected similarly as these intersections to the west. If we can go to the next slide. So this is the redevelopment concept that was looked at during that traffic study, essentially redeveloping all of the Texa Tonka commercial node into more mixed use development with commercial on the ground floor, residential above, as well as a multifamily building and townhomes on this site that we're talking about tonight. So very similar. Next slide. And so with that, all of the intersections were given an analysis and assigned a level of service and a delay. And they looked at what the existing conditions were in 2019, what the existing conditions would be in 2030 if no changes were to occur to the Texa Tonka commercial area. This essentially takes into account all of the background growth that's in St. Louis Park and surrounding communities using these Minnetonka and Texas as their primary routes of transportation. And then a 2030 build scenario, which looked at what the numbers would be if all of Texa Tonka redeveloped. And as you can see, almost all of the intersections within the study area operated at a level of service A or B throughout the today and in 2030, no build, and in 2030, if all of Texa Tonka were to be redeveloped. The only intersection that had any change from the level of service degree is Minnetonka at Texas, which went from a level of service A with a no build scenario to a level of service B with a build scenario. But that delay is actually only 1.1 second. It's just on that threshold of A to B level of service. So Even if all of Texa Tonka were redeveloped, because the roads are designed to hold such large amounts of traffic, the actual effect to those intersections would be very minimal. Next slide. So again, all intersections operate at that acceptable level of level of service B or better. Next slide. And then I think some of you might be aware, but if not, I wanted to bring to your attention that the city is working with Hennepin County to actually reconstruct the Texas and Minnetonka intersection. The plans are to lower the intersection about 3 to 4 feet to increase the sight lines. Right now, if you're coming over the curve at the intersections, it's kind of hard to see if you're making right or left turns. And so we're working on that. It's currently not something that's funded in the county's 5-year capital improvement plan. So the construction date is to be determined, but it's something that we're working on, and it's something that the city is pushing for to get included in the county's funding budget. So more details on that, but this development proposal has been designed around those cities' future plans to lower the intersection.
And Jennifer, maybe you're clear on that, just to clarify, that's a separate project and not, that was planned before this proposal.
Yes. The city's been working on this for a number of years. We know that it's an issue. We would have liked to have done it as Centerpoint was doing the work just recently along Texas. However, because it wasn't funded by the county and it's mostly a county intersection, it was not fixed when that Centerpoint Energy work was being done. And so with that, here's our contact information, but we can answer some questions. And I've been trying to answer some of the questions in the chat box, but because we have some people joining us from the phone, I didn't want to answer too many. So I'm going to go up to the top question. Mike asks, how can we protect Texas Avenue during construction? There were some major issues during the gas line update, and they would prefer to not see it shut down again. Also to make sure that the street isn't used for parking overnight once the complex is complete. So Mike, I can take a stab at answering that question. We will work very closely with the developer to keep that street open as much as humanly possible. There might be some times where concrete needs to be poured and the street would need to be closed for a few hours or a day. But the contractor would work very closely with the surrounding neighborhood to make sure notifications are given in advance, and that any shutdowns that are required are as minimally nuisance as possible.
I live on the road where the Centerpoint project just came through, and although it was a really fun day trip every day with our son to go look at construction equipment, that was major and major shutdown, and as Jennifer pointed out, not something that I would anticipate here, close to that. So,
and Mike is actually raising his hand, so I'm going to let him ask a question.
Thank you.
Follow up to that.
Thank you for that. I guess I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
My concern is it's not just the saying that we're going to have the communication during this and I'm not saying, Mike, that this project would do the same, but we lacked communication whatsoever, and we're the business across the street. So if we get shut down, you guys are moving forward with your construction, but we lose a whole day's worth of patients, or we get patients who are lost, and there's no communication, and again, that impacts a small business across the street. So I just want to make sure that that's very clear to the people on the phone, that it's not just the Texa Tonka shopping center across the street. There's a small business across the street from this complex that could be heavily impacted. So just want to make sure that's taken into account.
Understood.
Thank you, Mike.
I have a question. I'm sorry to just interrupt. But I don't know how to do the chat thing. I'm on a computer I'm not familiar with.
All right.
Can you, I do have a question, but if you want to take the ones that have put it on chat first and then just call on me in a little bit.
You could ask your question.
Okay. My name is Cindy, and the two of us are watching this, and we live down off of Aquila into Cobble Crest. And we were just wondering, because we missed the first 20 minutes. I thought that it said on the Nextdoor app that you were starting at 7 tonight. I didn't realize it was 6 to 7:30. So you may have already talked about these things. I don't mean to repeat if I am. So I don't know if that was a misprint or I didn't realize you were starting at 6. So just a quick question. I talked to the people at Pasture Properties about 3 or 4 different times. And we've been watching the construction going on at Texa Tonka. And we had asked, even at the city council meeting, if they were going to possibly consider putting in a co-op, like there was a proposal in Golden Valley for the Wedge. And they said that they were looking into lots of different options. And
yes, Cindy, I think you and I chatted about.
We did. I thought the name sounded familiar. I mean, did that just kind of fall off the wayside, or what happened?
No, look, I think in general in the area, there's still potential for a grocer, and we, still having those conversations where they make sense. But so I don't know if that answers your question or not. But
yeah, it does. And it's sort of irrelevant to what you're talking about now. It sounds like this is already a done deal and that you're going to be doing this project. So are you talking about maybe it would be somewhere else in the shopping center? Or?
I'm not sure. It's speculative at this point. Yeah.
Not a whole lot of space left.
No, we have space left.
So, and then one other question. When is the proposal for all the shops in Texa Tonka? Are they waiting to build this complex with the apartments, et cetera? Or when are they going to open the shops? It's been, they just finished the whole thing, but it's been about 2 years now.
In the shopping center?
Yes.
So we completed our renovation in 2019 into 2020, and we're actively out looking for commercial tenants. You missed the first part, but
I did. I apologize.
We have signed 2 leases with 2 new restaurants that will open up hopefully March, kind of April timeframe. And we continually actively scout the market for other commercial tenants. As you can imagine, COVID has dramatically impacted
Absolutely
commercial tenants. But I would say this: out of all of our properties in our portfolio, Texa Tonka has the strongest leasing activity at the moment. So, we're excited about that. And I just saw a comment on, can I share the names? One tenant would like to remain confidential for the moment, but they are getting very close to announcing. So expect to see something on that shortly.
So, and I do apologize because we missed the beginning. What are the rental rates for the apartments? Have you given that information out yet?
The rents on the units that are not affordable will be market rate, and projecting out into 2022, I think on average the rents would be around $1,800 a month, and then on the affordable units, the studios and alcoves are around $870 a month. The 1 bedrooms would be $925 a month, and the 2 bedrooms, and that would include some affordable townhomes at $1,100 per month.
Okay.
All right.
Cindy, I'm going to mute you so we can go to some other questions. That was one of the things at the beginning of the presentation where you get one question, then I'm going to mute you, and you get another question. And just so you know, we
I have
are
a question.
recording this meeting. And so if you missed the beginning, we will post this on the city's website, so you'll have the opportunity to go back and review anything that you might have missed. We have a hand up from Kate. Kate could ask her question. You still want to ask it. Maybe her question got answered.
Good evening. I have a question.
Yes, please.
So, Mr. Sheldon, you mentioned that you're gonna in your scheme of the lighting in the back of the building. How is that gonna work at 3 stories and properties are directly in the back of it? And making sure that hold tight, and making sure that it's safe for the residents and for people that own their properties in that area.
Right. So one piece of that is, you know, the units that face that side, it's really a side of the building, so there's not really a focus of much light on that as far as what would project into neighboring properties. And on top of that, the city of St. Louis Park has a requirement not to you know, let whatever lighting you have on your property to spill over to adjacent ones. And so the lighting that we have on our site will be focused on our site alone, and it will be there for either some accent lighting for balconies and things, or for some, you know, I guess you could call it just wayfinding and safety lighting in the parking areas, as well as what's augmented by city street lights that are currently on Texas.
So it'll be sort of like more of a dim type of scenario, you think?
Yeah, I think as far as any of the neighborhoods or neighbors would be would observe would be, you know, I think it's going to be bright enough to be safe for people around the property, but it's not going to be a lot of light going out to the neighbors, not at all.
Well, I kind of question that, because the fact that you put in garages in the back there, and with all the canopy with the trees that are there already, it's going to be a huge concern with tenants that, you know, have access to the garages in the back, kind of make it look like they can do some certain things at certain specific times. So, you know, if you can clarify that some more for me, it'll help. You know, the lighting is good and everything. Are you guys going to put up cameras? What's your second step?
Oh, in terms of safety back there?
Well, safety is the #1 thing, sir. Don't you think, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So that's what we focus on.
Sure.
Well, I think that there'll be plenty of light on our property back there at the parking areas, and
yeah.
You know, as far as cameras and things, we haven't really got to that level of development at this point, but in general, there'll be some exterior cameras just for, you know, some having an aspect of visibility for building management.
And Sheldon, this is Jennifer. The city also does require security cam all parking garages, just to make sure that access is monitored and it's safe inside the garages. So that's something that we require as a city.
Well, you know, again, that's all fine and dandy, but the city also haven't had 100% of lockdown of the kind of specific type of people that goes to Louisiana court and to the black apartments for many years. So bringing a smaller apartment facility in a smaller area is great concern to me, and especially doing 20% of the market rental as you know, for a specific class of people is you know, it doesn't sit well with me.
Okay.
Thank you. We're
Thanks.
going to go to the next question. And Kate had her hand raised again, so I'm going to go back to you, Kate, see if you're able to unmute yourself and ask your question. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I could not get unmuted before. So I actually have two comments and we'll do one and then maybe come back. Number one, I think the traffic study is a little bit naive. You didn't look at any of the other intersections. You're putting a couple hundred people in this area, and the other intersection that is a problem is the uncontrolled intersection at Virginia Avenue and Cedar Lake. And you're basically assuming that all these people are going to go out onto Minnetonka. And I don't think that's a very valid assumption. And I imagine people that use that intersection can kind of speak to it, that is a problem getting out onto Cedar Lake during certain times of day. And also, you know, what's going to happen to traffic down on Louisiana and Minnetonka, which also has some very serious backups during certain times of the day. So I guess that's part one.
Thank you. So the traffic study did take into account all background growth, including background growth that's happening throughout St. Louis Park and surrounding communities, downtown Minneapolis, uptown Minneapolis, where a lot of that traffic does go through Minnetonka Boulevard, and that was all included in the traffic study.
You didn't, and you sort of didn't answer my question about the intersections that were not presented in the study. Were
And
those
so
looked at?
We looked at the intersections going north on 29th and 28th. And even those intersections, their level of service improved with the growth from 2030 and redevelopment of the Texa Tonka node. So because those immediate intersections were not negatively affected, the study did not need to go out all the way to Cedar Lake Road.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comment.
It's part two. I also, if you look at the Texa Tonka study, in nowhere in that Texa Tonka study did it ever include a 5-story building. Look at that building compared to the surrounding areas. The current zoning doesn't support that, and certainly none of the information that the city gathered from the surrounding neighborhoods support that. And I'll find and get, you know, I understand we need the housing, but why do you bother to ask residents of what they want when this proposal really did not take into any account of anything in that study?
Thank you. So the study was solicited by the city of St. Louis Park. It was done by the city. There are recommendations in that plan for design guidelines and how architecture would look. And it looked at what people would desire in the area for redevelopment if redevelopment were to be proposed. That doesn't prohibit any developer for proposing an application or a development for each of the sites that might be different from that small area plan. However, it gives Planning Commission and City Council more guidance into what the public input was for that. So this is part of that. The proposal for the development is, this is part of that process, is going through and reviewing how the development meets the city's plans and goals and priorities. And ultimately, it will be up to Planning Commission to make a recommendation and City Council to approve any plans for the site.
So basically, and I'll leave it at that, but in other words, if the city is going to go ahead with what they think is best, why do you waste money on the study? Moving on. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, we have a few more questions, and I think, John, your hand is raised next. If you could unmute yourself.
Hear me?
Yeah, a little bit.
Excellent. I've got my headset on, so if you can hear me. And Jerry, it's great to hear your voice. Anyway, Mike, I just want to start off by thank you guys did a great job on the shopping center. And again, like Kate said, I was on some of the workshops, and so when I saw the plans for this, I have to admit that it's much taller than what the feedback from the area is. So That's one of my biggest concerns. The other thing is that, you know, from just a design point of view, if you look at the neighborhood and you want it to fit into the neighborhood, most of the houses are either Ramblers or Cape Cods and have pointed roofs. And this has a flat roof and it sticks out like a sore thumb. So it doesn't blend in. It's like, okay, we're going to take a round peg and stick it in a square hole. And then my only other, I think Mike's first question about parking on Texas, I don't know if that question was answered.
Thanks. I don't know that Mike's question, it was in the chat box. He was asking about parking on Texas. Currently, there is no parking towards the intersection, and I don't believe there is parking on the northern half of the site because there's a bike lane there. So no parking would be allowed there to accommodate that existing bike lane. And then I would also, and maybe Sheldon and Mike, you're better equipped to answer the question about the architecture, but I believe that some of the design of the buildings actually came from the Texa Tonka small area plan, which all of the public input for that plan really wanted to see more of that mid-century modern architecture that is very prevalent in the Texa Tonka commercial node. And I believe that that's where the forms of the building are being drawn from.
Correct. That and pulling some cues from the shopping center. There's some design elements that we're pulling over to the apartment project with also taking into consideration desires from the small area plan. Thanks.
Thanks. So Sharon, you have your hand up. You could ask your question.
Yeah, hi guys. So I think my question is along the lines of what has been discussed over the last 5 minutes, the small study that occurred, and I think the city solicited through Nextdoor, maybe starting about 2 years ago, feedback from the community for the quadrant. So is what happened to the Texa Tonka shopping center, is that what came out of that small study? And then this proposed site with the apartments and the townhouses, that too is included? Because I was under the impression that that whole effort got thrown out the window when the property was sold. And then to that effect, also, just the second part of that question, I'm sorry. The quadrant study also included the 2 corners on the south side of Minnetonka Boulevard. Where are we at in that phase of the study? So I'll turn it back to you guys.
Mike,
and let me just say one more thing too. Anything is going to be better than that god awful parking lot that I've been looking at for the last 25 years. So thank you for something going in.
All right, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Mike, I can address the small area plan. So as noted, as we were doing the planning study for that small area plan, the majority of the commercial properties at the Texa Tonka commercial node has been owned by one entity for decades, since about the 50s and 60s. They still own portions of the property in that intersection, and they are currently in the process of divesting their real estate in the area. So, Pastor, I believe, Mike, you were already in the process of purchasing the shopping center when we started the small area plan. And part of the reason that we did the small area plan was because we knew that the existing or the previous owner was finally at a place where they were willing to sell the properties. So we knew that there was going to be some investment coming in the area, and we wanted to get people's input before development proposals and redevelopment occurred. So, and now we're at one stage and part of the redevelopment and reinvestment of Texa Tonka. Let's see. There's no more hands raised, but I think there's a couple of questions in the comment box.
Hey, Jennifer, Kristen has had her hand up, like physically hand up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see her. Let's see.
Marathon time.
Let me go. There you go, Kristen. If you could, let's see, unmute yourself. And unfortunately, I'm unable to unmute you. Let's see if I can unmute you. There you go. We can hear you.
Thank you. I didn't know how to virtually raise my hand, so I had to do it the old-fashioned way. For the proposed underground parking, where is the entrance for that? Thank you.
You bet. Sheldon, you want to take that? Yeah.
All right. The entry to that parking area is just inside of the access from Texas, so it's right on this north side of the building, which takes advantage of the way that the road dips down here, and then we're able to enter into that garage there.
Don't have it. I live on Texas Avenue, right across from the empty lot. I don't understand where you're talking about.
Oh,
can you
okay.
Answer, please?
Sure.
Oh,
so,
are you able to see the screen, Krista?
Barely.
Oh.
Okay.
Let's see. So,
a little better.
If you know where, so it's basically, if you think about where the shopping center is, and then
right.
Start counting the houses, we're about 2.5 houses down from the north side of the shopping center is where that access point is.
Right where I live.
Pardon?
Right where I live.
Are you across the street there?
I'm a couple houses north of the dentist.
Okay.
Oh, okay. And they're here, aren't they? At the first one?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and the way we have it located, it's kind of in between the two houses. So cars, leaving, coming out are, instead of facing directly into a house, they're kind of in between the two. So, all right. Any other questions? Okay.
Darla has her hand up. Darla, if you could unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. I see what you've done to Texa Tonka. I will agree that's been great. I thought I just heard that something about a 5-story going on top of that as well. I don't know if I misheard that, but I also think that there's really a lot of unrealistic feelings about this traffic. I'm very concerned. I think that this is just this study. I don't understand where you come up with this nonsense. If you can't tell me you're putting over 100 people over there, and I'm 2 blocks from this, and it's not going to cause traffic, I think that is just completely just not ignoring what the residents want and what's important to them. This looks like it's a moneymaker. I want to know how much my taxes are going to go up. Are they going to go down? Is the value of my home? You're sticking a 6-story building 2 blocks from me. I'm very upset about it. I also looked at the studies. I don't remember this being this tall. I don't remember a lot of, because you can't read blueprints. Most of us can see them, but we really don't. We don't really look at them that well. So I guess I'm just commenting and saying, what's this going to do for my taxes? What is this going to do to my property value? And it just doesn't seem very realistic to a residential neighborhood. And I'm very upset about it. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Gretchen also has her hand up. If you could unmute yourself, Gretchen.
Hi there. Yeah, the zoning question. I thought that, how do you get zoning and that's looks like pretty dense residential into a neighborhood like this? Because you said you were going to have to change zoning. So I would like to hear more about that. But again, I agree with a lot of the sentiment. that people have been saying, we have been asked for the last year or more, longer, the city has been getting community feedback, Texa Tonka feedback, little meetings with the residents where there were sandwiches and getting feedback. And there's been a lot of chatter on Nextdoor, getting feedback from the residents. The residents had lots of ideas about stuff that they would love to see go in here. And I remember exactly 0 people saying they wanted a 4-story low-income housing apartment development coming up, especially considering we have apartments pretty much surrounding us already. We need some in the middle. Nobody asked for this that I know of. If somebody asked for this, corrected me in the chat, but 0 people that I've heard from asked for this. So you have to, you're having this meeting now. We need you to give us some feedback as to why this is happening, because I don't know anyone who wants this. That's all I got.
Thanks, Gretchen, for your comments. And I will answer your question about the zoning. So Pastor Properties has submitted applications for rezoning of this site to a planned unit development, which is a unique zoning district that essentially we are writing the zoning for the property. And so they're requesting that of City Council, and more to come.
And Jennifer, just to clarify, under that zoning, what we're proposing is less dense than allowable under that zoning.
Right. So they're requesting a land use change to high density, which allows up to 75 units an acre, as well as a planned unit development. And they're proposing approximately 60 units an acre for the site. Sorry, I muted myself. Tim has his hand raised. Tim, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm a resident of the neighborhood. I live 1 block from the proposed development, and I'm in full support of the project. I think it's a thoughtful design in combining it with the commercial next door. So I just want to say I fully support the project, and I live very close by.
Thanks, Tim. Let's see, Noah, I'm going to ask, Noah has his hand raised. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Hey, so I want to say that I actually am really pro this. I think it'll be good for the, I live a block and a half away. My assumption is this will actually be good for my property value because it's going to increase the property value of that area. I've lived here 8 years, and every time driving by that parking lot, it makes me sad. And I think it'll be really good to bring in more shops, hopefully, into the rest of Texa Tonka. The one question I did have was, would there be like a community room or something that we could possibly rent out at the in the apartment building?
Sorry, Mike, I have to unmute you. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, there you go.
There we go. So sorry, Noah, the question was on if there's a community room within the building. Currently, that's not the plan. It's certainly something we can think about. I think we're hoping with some of the tenants that are going into the shopping center that are centered on the plaza area that that there's some communal kind of meeting space there. So hopefully more to come on that.
Thanks, Mike. If we could go to a question in the chat. Gina asks, what's the expected lifespan quality of the units going up? Will they be engineered to be replaced in a few decades, or will they be last a really long time like the existing brick buildings?
Sheldon, do you want to tackle?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the buildings are designed for, say 80, 100, 200, whatever years. I mean, buildings are too expensive to build in the first place to not build them. well and with quality materials. And that goes hand in hand with some of the requirements that the city of St. Louis Park has, as well as sustainability. I guess that's something that I didn't talk about much, but I'll just take this opportunity to briefly just run through a few items. In addition to some solar power that we're going to have on the south side of the building, on that upper roof, we also have high efficiency, both in terms of the exterior envelope of the building, as far as really well insulated, really good windows, really efficient appliances, mechanical systems, as well as some of that efficiency also happens just by having a building that instead of just by them being next to each other, they have less exterior um, building envelope to heat and cool or keep warm, and so the individual residents would have that benefit as well. Let's see. That's the highlights without getting into a lot of very specific pieces. But and on top of that, there's also a stormwater catchment basin, I guess you could call it, on the property that will be using that will help the stormwater in the neighborhood as well. So that's another added benefit of doing the project.
Thanks, Sheldon. Emily B has her hand up. Emily, if you could unmute yourself.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the information this evening. I live over on Aquila, so I'm not immediately adjacent, but I'm definitely in the area. And I also appreciate a lot of what's proposed. I agree with a previous comment. I would like to see a little bit something more, frankly, eye-catching on the roof line on the townhomes. I think the rendering from the small area plan that you showed earlier on one of the slides had that kind of more peaked roof that I think would look nice. I get it on an apartment, there's only so much you can do, but I think on the townhomes, because that is in that northern end away from the shopping area a little bit better or a little bit further, that would be a nicer look myself. I'm a little concerned about the overall height of the apartment, but I do get, and the comments earlier about the low income piece, I mean, I believe 20% is the requirement for new multifamily, just across the board, or maybe it's like, there's a minimum, I can't quite remember the moment. 10, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a constant issue, is having affordable housing in St. Louis Park. As a first-tier suburb, we struggle with this, and I think having this as an opportunity, especially right on a bus line, is really great. That we're not right now, but normally the 17 bus gets a lot of use, and I think that that's really a great place to have that. And I really appreciate the sustainability piece too. I assume, because I think the city ordinance requires like electric car charging and new stuff too, that would be part of it, which would be great for folks who opt to that. But my main thing is I'd like to see just a little bit more, a little bit more character, I guess, for the townhome roofs. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Emily. Let's see, there are no hands up currently, so let's go back to the chat box. Someone asked Councilmember Harris for your contact information. At the end of this, I'll put her information on there. It's also available on the city's website. If you go to stlouispark.org, you can find Councilmember Harris's contact information. We asked if the development includes Section 8 housing. So I believe that that's considered the voucher program, as it's otherwise called. That's not technically part of the city's inclusionary housing policy. We just require the developer provide a certain percentage of the units at affordable housing levels. I think there are other components in there with the Fair Housing Act and accepting vouchers, but I don't know the details about all of that. It's something that the management company for the building will have to work through. I don't know, Mike, if you know anything more specific about that.
I don't. I'd have to chat with our management team, but I can get some clarity on that.
Marcus asks if bus lines are going to be reworked to provide access from high density portions like this to the nearest LRT station, and if the developers are in conversation with the city in advance of that. Thanks, Marcus. That is one of the things that the city or Met Council and Met Transit are working on with the future LRT station. There will be some routes that are reworked so they go closer to those LRT stations more frequently. I don't know that the exact routes have been figured out at this time, but that is something that they will be working on and will be figured out prior to the operation of LRT.
And we would agree. We would welcome direct connections to LRT as well.
Oh, and Rachel has her hand raised. Rachel, can you unmute yourself? Councilmember Harris.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to jump in and say I've been reading the comments in chat. Thank you for adding those. I've also been jotting down notes of what people are saying. And I learned that this meeting is being recorded. I am planning to go back and re-listen to comments people are mentioning. In the chat, I did see there were a number of questions about relating to the assumption that this project is already approved, and it is not approved. So this community meeting is part of our city's outreach and engagement to get input before a project moves into further stages. Let's see here. So just wanted to make that clear for folks who had questions about that. It hasn't been approved. And Jennifer, at this point, I feel it would be helpful for you to reiterate the next steps, you know, planning commission, public hearing, council, etc. And
right.
Also, yeah, if you could, the timeline on that. Thank you.
Sure. So at this point, the development proposal is anticipated to go to the planning commission sometime in mid-December, I think. Right now we're shooting for December 16th. That date is still to be determined based on plans. But once that date is determined, it will be posted in the Sun Sailor. I think 12 days before that meeting, it will be on the city's website. Notices will be mailed to everyone within 500 feet. And the Planning Commission will hold that public hearing and they will review the plans and make a recommendations to City Council. The plans will then go to City Council in January for Council's consideration, where in order for the plans to be 100% approved, City Council will have to hold 2 readings of an ordinance to approve the zoning for the site. So it will go before Council for 2 meetings minimum. So that's the process going forward. There's a couple more questions here, and I think Andrea also would like to ask a question, so I'm going to unmute you. There we go.
Good evening. I'm a member of the Neighborhood Association. I just want to say thank you to Pastor Properties and to Jennifer for this presentation and for answering so many questions. And it's great to hear from so many residents. And I personally think it's great to see a revitalization of that area, especially after seeing what's happened so far with the shopping center. And I understand a few of the many of the comments where people are frustrated that doesn't align to maybe what they put in the small area questionnaire, but I think it also addresses a lot of the strategic plans and the initiatives that were set forth in that plan by neighborhoods and residents. And maybe you guys can just address how this does touch on those. Thanks again.
Thanks, Andrea. So yeah, the small area plan really created a vision for the Texa Tonka commercial area and this intersection and these properties to create a vibrant, walkable space for people to live, work, play, enhanced landscaping, more housing, more commercial opportunities, so people have services close to their house, and a part of providing those services is having the density to support those services. So, you know, I think while the exact height of the buildings weren't specified in the plan, the general concept of having a multifamily building on this corner with townhomes on the north side were definitely included in that plan, and were heavily supported by thousands of people who took the surveys, and some people who voted no on some of those questions because they thought it should have been higher density. So I think, you know, with the enhanced landscaping and the reinvestment and the revitalization and just investment in a part of town that has not seen investment in decades, it helps private investment in decades. It helps to achieve some of the goals and the visions of that plan. And let's see, there's just a couple more questions here. Are police and fire resources able to handle this increase in the area? And the answer is yes, they have no concerns over this development proposal. Let's see. And then there's some questions about why is this development a single or a multifamily building in townhomes rather than a single family development? Mike, I'm going to let you answer part of that, but then we also did a market study for the small area plan, and that market study looked to see what the demand is in the Texa Tonka area for single family homes, but multifamily homes and just new residences in general. And while there is a demand for single family homes in the entire city of St. Louis Park, there's also a really high demand for many more multifamily units. And this is a large enough site where some of those multifamily units could be accommodated. It's really hard to fit very many single family homes on a lot such as this that likely has a really high redevelopment cost as well as high contamination and cleanup. So, you know, there's market forces other than just wanting single family homes to be on these lots. But Mike, I don't know, Mike, if you could touch on that a little bit more. I think you're muted, so let me unmute you one more time.
Sorry, I keep muting myself. There's a little bit of background noise. So a couple things to touch on the single family home question. Like where we landed with the rental townhomes is kind of looking at the area and saying, it seems like there's some need for not only some families to move into those townhomes, but also some empty nesters that have lived in the area for a long time that want to stay in the area, but aren't ready to downsize yet into maybe a more traditional apartment building. So along with that, as Jennifer mentioned, really, really high land acquisition costs for a site this large. And then also, along with poor contaminated soils, there's also just unsuitable fill in this area. So that requires a fairly significant foundation system. And so it just becomes, you put all that together and it becomes really challenging to build a single family home that doesn't end up costing, you know, about $1 million. So hopefully that provides some color on that question.
Thanks, Mike. I'm just trying to see if there are other questions here. There was one question about, let's see, if the city is investing in the property for like tax increment financing or TIF. The developer has submitted applications for tax increment financing, which is a special taxing tool that the city is able to use to help reinvest in areas. And they have submitted applications for that. That's currently being reviewed by the city and the city's consultants, and will go to the city's Economic Development Authority, which is also the city council, for their decision whether the city is supportive of providing TIF for this project or not. Yeah, I have a couple of hands raised. Let's see, Rachel, you're first on my list, so Councilmember Harris, I'm gonna. Did it work?
You know what? I think that I was an old hand raised. So please move on to someone else. Thank you anyhow.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Scott. You could unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much. My name's Scott Kozlowski. I'm one of the folks on the Neighborhood Association in Texa Tonka as well. Just wanted to say thanks for having this tonight. We really appreciate it. And if there's anything we can do to facilitate, we know that there's obviously some difference of opinions and what should go there. And the proposal here that's set forward seems to be in pretty good guidelines. If there's anything we can do as a association to facilitate, let us know. If there's any community input that anyone here on the call has, please let us know. We're happy to speak with Mike and Jennifer about that. Mike and Jennifer have been very good with their time so far with us, and kind of letting us know what this plan is, and we look forward to working with them, and hopefully we can move along with the plan. So thank you so much for having this meeting. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. And I want to be really respectful of everyone's time tonight. We said that the meeting would end at 7:30. I have one more person with a hand raised, Jeremiah. So Jeremiah, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself, but please feel free if anyone doesn't want to stick around any longer. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Mike, myself, the development team, Councilmember Harris. All of our information is found on the project page on the city's website. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have, and look forward to talking with you. So with that, I'm going to allow Jeremiah, if you could unmute yourself.
Yes, so listening for the last half an hour, again, Mr. Sheldon, you never told me your strategy for, putting cameras on your property over there in the back. And secondly, I think because it's going to be kind of an eyesore, as John mentioned earlier, I believe you guys need to like tone it down a little, a story or so, and try to go back to the drawing board and get your ducks in a row. I welcome the fact that change is definitely needed in the area, but I think you guys pushing a little too hard. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremiah.
Thanks, Jeremiah. Any other questions? People are willing to stick around. We're available to answer any questions. I feel like there's just a couple more questions in the chat box asking about the future of the intersection, and if Texas will need to be closed for any amount of time. So as part of the development plans, as we mentioned earlier, the contractors will work really closely to keep Texas Avenue open through construction. There might be some times when the lane might need to be closed for a period of time if concrete needs to be poured, and that's the best place to pour it from. If that is the case, notification will be made in advance to all of the surrounding properties, and it will be timed so it doesn't completely shut the road down for weeks at an end, like the past construction that has gone on all summer. And then for the intersection, the building has been designed to accommodate that future intersection, and we are working with the development team to make sure that that is accommodated.
Miss Jennifer, this is Rachel Harris. May I add one thing?
Yes, please.
All right. So first of all, thank you everybody for the meeting, and to all of our neighborhood folks for sharing part of your Thursday evening with us. Your comments matter, and they do shape how this project proceeds. As one of the neighborhood leaders mentioned, there are differences of opinion, and that's okay. This is why we have these conversations, to hear what people think and look toward coming coming together in the middle. The best way to reach me is by email. I've shared that in the chat feature. Please be aware that for transparency's sake, I do frequently share comments back to staff so that they can adapt and shift as needed to resident comments as well. Lastly, I'd like to thank Mike Sturdivant for your partnership in development. Working together with you on the Texa Tonka Shopping Center project has been dynamic and quite positive. So you've been a terrific partner to our community thus far. And I can tell you that I've lived in this neighborhood for 12 years. I live right on Texas. And the fact that there is a potential new use in a vacant parking lot that's been vacant for close to 2 decades is very positive. So for folks on the call, please know that there is another opportunity to weigh in at the Planning Commission. And it looks like that will be in mid-December. More details on the city website, as Jennifer Munson mentioned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. It's been our pleasure as well.
Mike, there's just a few more questions in the chat.
Okay, sure. I'm here.
Michelle asks how they'll lower the road at Texas and Minnetonka. And Michelle, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. And it's one that should really be geared toward the city's engineering department. I unfortunately don't have the specific details on how that will be done. I know that they have 30% plans drawn up right now that they're working with Hennepin County on. But the exact final details of the intersection lowering have not been figured out. It's just we know that it would improve the sightlines on that intersection, and so it's something that we're working towards doing. But Mike, here's a question for you. Once developed, who will manage the apartment day to day? Is that a different company than Pastor Properties?
At this point, it appears to be a Stephen Scott Management. Stephen Scott Management we've worked closely with for a number of years, and they help us out quite a bit on the housing side. So they are also a local St. Louis Park-based company.
And then question from Emily, will any changes be made to the plan based on this virtual meeting before it goes to the Planning Commission?
That's a great question. Like all these meetings, we take all the feedback that we heard tonight and take as much of it into consideration as we can. So I think that's about all I can say at this point about that.
And I'll also add, if any of the plans do change, they will be posted to the city's website prior to the Planning Commission meeting. So just, and all meeting details will be posted to that website. Keep an eye on it. It's the bit.ly link that was sent as part of the neighborhood flyer and was posted to Nextdoor. That bit.ly link automatically goes to the city's web page for this development proposal. So you can keep checking back and it will be updated as I have new information to update it with. I don't see any more comments and no one's hands are raised. So I just want to thank you all for coming to tonight's meeting. Thank you, Mike and Sheldon, for your presentations and holding the virtual neighborhood meeting. We appreciate the opportunity to get additional feedback from our residents.
Our pleasure. Thanks for being such a great virtual host. That yeah, did a great job.
Yes, thank you all very much for giving us some good feedback. So appreciate it.
We're around anytime as well. Our contact info is out there and shared. So any additional comments, questions, we're always here. So thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a great evening. Enjoy this beautiful, nice warm weather before winter comes.